ClancyPasta presents It Came from the Depths, written by Alec 2004. It came from the depths. My grandfather's voice was hoarse and croaky, tainted by years of whiskey, cigarettes, and the cold sea breeze. He served in the Second World War, aboard the freighters that carried food and equipment from Scotland to Murmansk, through the Arctic Circle and the coldest waters one could find. He always had stories to tell about his time in the Navy, but as time wore on and as the last few years have passed, he has slowed down. Moving into a rest home was hard for him, and recently I think the whole family, my grandfather included, have realized he didn't have much longer to go. And so when I visited him for the last time before his passing, he sat me down and began to recount one of his many experiences that he had never shared with anyone. He said it was important, and that I needed to know. And so he turned off his small radio that he kept on one of his shelves and reclined in his lazy boy as he invited me to sit on his couch. Then he started to speak. It came from the depths. We were a week out of Scapa Flow and had just rounded the tip of Norway. It was a quiet run. We only lost a freighter to an air attack from some German bombers. Anyway, it was 7:30 and my buddies and I had just sat down for dinner when all the lights and all the noise on the ship ceased. You could have heard a pin drop in those first few seconds of nothingness. However, the silence was shattered by a man-operated bell that called for action stations. I sprang into action, bolting upright, and then made my way towards the top of the bridge of the ship, hopping into a small balcony containing a signal light and flags. Upon orders from one of the officers, I began to signal the other ships traveling with us, saying that we had just lost power and we are stationary. Even when I was flashing my lights, I knew the response wasn't going to be good. We were told that we would have to be left behind, as a stationary ship was a sitting duck for a U-boat. I knew at that point we were fucked. It was a cold December night, and since I had come straight from dinner, I was dressed only in longs, socks, and a fleece. No gloves. It wasn't even a cloudy night. The still ship was basked in moonlight that illuminated its shape for any patrolling submarine to see. The worst part was the waiting. Everyone was in action stations looking out for periscopes in the wake of a torpedo. I was constantly alert, despite being cold and tired. Fear and a constant flow of adrenaline kept me awake. As the moon made its way from one end of the sky to the other, I became increasingly worried that I would freeze in the cold. What the fuck had gone wrong down there? I had thought to myself. Surely an electrical or mechanical fault wouldn't take this long to fix. I thought I would go insane. The constant waiting, watching, and anticipating wore me out mentally. It was right on midnight when it came. The first thing I remember happening was a waterspout climbing hundreds of feet into the air, showering the starboard side and causing large waves to rock the ship. I was thrown to the ground by the sudden burst of water, but quickly made my way back to my feet after cleaning some seawater out of my eyes. It was then I observed the most horrifying thing I've ever witnessed. A large, twisting tentacle emerged from the water. It seemed to be changing colors as it moved. However, each color was clouded by a dark gray tint. It shot through the bow of the ship. Watching from my position, I saw as it picked sailors up and either threw them into the water or pulled them down into the sea. Another tentacle emerged, this time coming from the other side of the ship, repeating the same procedure as the first. Each tentacle looked so different, as if they came from different sea monsters, yet at the same time they seemed perfectly symmetrical, wreaking havoc in the same patterns and movements. But then the body of the thing emerged. and to this day, I cannot find the words to describe it. It was covered in slime, the ever-changing skin of the monster was reflective. Yet the reflections that it portrayed were corrupted. Straight lines became swirls, and certain parts of the reflection were enlarged, like someone had held a microscope over them. I saw myself in it, my face in the center of its head, swirling and contorting like someone was stretching my skin. Then its face emerged from the water. Its face was not reflective, in fact, quite the contrast. It was covered in scales and shaped like the face of a giant man, except it possessed a beak in favor of lips. And below said beak was thousands of smaller tentacles that seemed to be feeling around the air. Its eyes, though, they drew me in the same way that a pretty woman's would. They were concave yet seemingly endless. Beams of light shot through them, and I swear to you, I could see, well, everything. The universe, its creation, and the history of both humanity and of this creature. Instantly, I knew this thing was from somewhere else. Not an alien, but perhaps something higher, a celestial being. As I said, I struggled to find words to describe this thing, but to put it simple, I knew as soon as I looked into its eyes that the creature was infinite. It was present at the universe's creation. It was a god, a deity, perhaps. I snapped out of my trance by the snapping of the ship. We were going down, back down to the depths. I knew I had to get off and away from the ship, or else I would be sucked down with it to God knows where. So I jumped. My stomach dropped and the cold winter air rushed past my body as I fell into the icy ocean. Without a life jacket, I battled to keep afloat in the freezing water. I quickly shed my socks and began to swim towards a wooden lifeboat. I managed to hop aboard and huddled with a few of my shipmates that had managed to survive. It must have been only a minute between me abandoning ship and hopping onto the lifeboat. Yet when I looked back over to where the monster was, there was nothing. No monster and no ship. I waited in the freezing cold for another week and a half before I was rescued by the returning convoy. I was the only survivor. I had put on my dead shipmates' clothes to keep warm and had fed on curious seabirds that I caught when they landed on the small boat. Luckily, one of the men had brought a canteen full of water with him, and once I had finished it, I was able to collect rainwater with it. No one believed my story when I arrived back home. They assumed I was crazy, and rightly so. Thus, as I recovered in hospital, I started to tell people that we were torpedoed. It was just easier. You're the first person that I've told since then. As you know, I spent the rest of the war working in the docks, and since then, I've never taken to the sea. Never take to the sea above the Arctic Circle, as it came from the depths, and it will return.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. I want to give a huge thanks to all of my supporters over at Patreon and YouTube memberships. Your support makes these narrations possible, and I appreciate it a ton. If you'd like to join these lovely ghouls, you can head on over to my Patreon at patreon.com/ClancyPasta, or click the join button below to become a member. And if you'd like creepy cool shirts, make sure to head on over and check out my official merch store for some awesome tees, hoodies, stickers, and more. Alright, thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great night. Cheers.